Minister is here after multiple requests that she's ignored and refused to show up, even though the Governor of the Bank of Canada has come regularly at the committee's request. Minister, you said, quote, "What Canadians want right now is for inflation to come down and for interest rates to fall. And that is one of our primary goals in this year's budget, not to pour fuel on the fire of inflation. So in our budget, we will exercise fiscal restraint," end quote. And what we see, again, is your government spending is causing inflation to go up again, like it went up today. Your fall economic statement said you would balance in 27-28, but after your $43 billion budget bonanza, you say you won't balance the budget. Why did you mislead Canadians?
Mr. Chair, and MP Hallan. The only people who are trying, I think unsuccessfully, because Canadians are smarter than that, to mislead Canadians are the Conservatives on this committee.
What was the change? How come your budget didn't balance?
The reality, I'm sorry.
That was the question.
Member, MP Hallan, yeah, we don't want the crosstalk for many different reasons. First is just in holding decorum and respect here at this committee. The other is the interpreters have often spoken to myself, to the clerk, etc., that they get affected. So they get affected by that crosstalk, and we don't want their health and safety to be impacted. So, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to address the two substantive points that were raised in the question. They are fiscal responsibility and inflation. When it comes to fiscal responsibility, let me emphasize a few points. Canada has the lowest deficit in the G7. Canada's fiscal position has been judged by the people who count the most.
Respectfully, Minister, I want to know what changed between.
Allow the minister to finish her
time.
No, we've stopped your time, but we allow the minister. Again, the crosstalk. We don't want any crosstalk. Again,
it is my
allow
floor.
the minister to complete her answer to your question. Well, yeah, she actually has not taken up that much time compared to the answer, so we'll allow the minister to continue.
Wait a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. If the Conservatives really are interested, as they should be, in the substance of what's happening in the Canadian economy, I'm happy to answer. So, on fiscal responsibility, Canada has the lowest deficit in the G7. We have a deficit which is steadily coming down.
That wasn't the question.
And we have. You did speak about the deficit, actually.
Yeah,
and we have a fiscal position.
Again, I'm going to have to interrupt again. So, MP Hallan, anything through the chair, please.
Okay.
And
Chair, I'll move on from that question because the minister is not going to answer it.
Okay.
I'd actually like to finish my answer.
I'd like
just
to
allow for the finishing.
And
Minister, if you could just wrap up the answer, and then we'll get to your next question. MP Hallan, we did stop the time. Minister.
Thank you, Chair. And Canada has a fiscal position which has been judged by the people who count our ratings agencies to be strong and sustainable. S&P, after I tabled the budget, reiterated our AAA rating with a stable outlook.
You're not going to get to the answer, so I'll have to move on because my time is limited.
MP Hallan, okay, yeah,
so
go ahead.
I have a simple question for you, just the date. When will the budget be balanced? Just the date.
As I said, the Conservatives seem uninterested in substantive answers. There was a question asked about inflation, and I think it is important to point out to Canadians that inflation is steadily coming down from its peak of 8.1% in June
the question was not about inflation.
4.4%. The previous question was, and I didn't have a chance to talk about inflation, which I think is on Canadians' minds.
MP Hallan, allow the minister, please, to conclude.
It was a simple question.
Yeah.
It was a simple question.
Minister.
Just a date.
So, just to conclude on inflation, which I do think Canadians care about, it's come down from a peak of 8.1% to 4.4%. The Bank of Canada is forecasting it will be at 3% in the summer and down to below 3% by the end of the year.
So the question was not about inflation. The question about balancing the budget, which obviously the minister is avoiding, which means she has no plan, and that's proven from blowing through any type of fiscal restraint in her latest failed Liberal budget. Minister, you said in the fall that the debt-to-GDP ratio is a red line you would not cross. And in Budget 2023, you blew past that line for the debt-to-GDP ratio in the fall economic statement and increased it to 43.5%. Now debt to GDP won't fall below 40% until 27-28, where you still won't even balance your budget, where you misled Canadians. Considering your track record that might be optimistic, why are you not serious about fiscal responsibility?
Mr. Chair, I am absolutely serious about fiscal responsibility, and I would urge Canadians and members of this committee not to be misled by overheated partisan rhetoric and to listen to objective people we should trust. Let me quote the parliamentary budget officer who actually explained to this committee, and I'm quoting him now, when looking at G7 countries, Canada compares very favorably on net debt to GDP. The parliamentary budget officer also described 2 members of this committee, a conversation he had with Moody's, and Moody's told him, and I'm now quoting the parliamentary budget officer, that Canada's deficit should, according to the PBO, quote, make us quite happy because by European standards, that's very low. That's an objective judgment.
That's the same public budgeting officer that said that your financials are not keeping one's powder dry and your budget is not fiscally responsible. So I'll move on. You said government spending, quote, these are investments in our future and they will yield great dividends. In fact, in today's low interest rate environment, not only can we afford these investments, it would be short-sighted of us not to make them, end quote. Interest rates are high. The debt has doubled because your government has had out-of-control spending. Do you regret misleading Canadians with this statement?
I've already explained that in the view of objective observers, Canada's fiscal position is strong, indeed enviable. And I absolutely
Minister, you're going to have one of the worst GDP per capita growth in the G7.
MP Hallan, please, no crosstalk. We're at the end of the time, but please, no crosstalk. We'd ask that all members, we are now moving over to the